Not only did President Trump refuse to tell the mob to leave the Capitol, he placed no call to any element of the United States government to instruct that the Capitol be defended. He did not call his Secretary of Defense on January 6th. He did not talk to his Attorney General. He did not talk to the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump gave no order to deploy the National Guard that day, and he made no effort to work with the Department of Justice to coordinate and deploy law enforcement assets. But Vice President Pence did each of those things.
It was another stunning revelation for many reasons from the January 6th committee. The complete inaction from the president, an attempt to fill in that missing call log, those hours that are missing, and Liz's testimony there that Trump refused to call the military as his supporters stormed and vandalized and engaged in combat with law enforcement officials protecting the U.S. Capitol. Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney then introduced testimony from General Mark Milley. He's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They confirmed that while Pence took all of those actions that Trump was willing to do, his team still came back and tried to clean that up and insisted on Milley getting involved in spinning how his inaction would look and how they wanted Milley to rewrite the narrative. Watch.
There were 2 or 3 calls with Vice President Pence. He was very animated, and he issued very explicit, very direct, unambiguous orders. There was no question about that. And I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere. But he was very animated, very direct, very firm, and to Secretary Milley. Get the military down here. Get the Guard down here. Put down this situation, etc.
By contrast, here is General Milley's description of his conversation with President Trump's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, on January 6th.
He said, we have to kill the narrative that the Vice President is making all the decisions. We need to establish the narrative that that the president is still in charge and that things are steady or stable or what's that thing. I immediately interpret that as politics, politics, politics. Red flag for me personally, no action, but I remember it distinctly.
Joining us now, Jonathan Lemire, White House Bureau Chief for Politico, the host of MSNBC's Way Too Early, also an MSNBC political analyst. Rick Stengel is here, MSNBC political analyst and a former top official in the U.S. State Department. Jonathan Lemire, 2 questions for you. One, it looks like even with some missing calls in the log, what the committee's investigators have done is gone the other way. And to answer questions about whether Trump did or did not talk to the military, did or did not talk to the Attorney General, did or did not engage DHS, did or did not call for the National Guard. They obviously have that information from other agencies. Liz testified to it. Your thought about that investigative work, and then this bigger question that I want to ask both of you about: who was the nation's commander-in-chief on January 6th?
I think what is clear, one of the findings from last night's blockbuster and rather stunning first day of these hearings, is that it was a dereliction of duty from the President of the United States on the day that presented the greatest challenge to his term, a challenge completely of his own creation. It was very clear, first of all, in the investigative work, the committee worked from the outside in, that even if the White House wasn't going to cooperate, even if the White House was having missing phone logs, they would talk to everyone else and recreate the day and piece together then President Trump's actions on January 6th. And we know he spent the vast majority of it in the private dining room just off the Oval Office, where there's a bank of televisions. And he watched with glee at times when he was watching scenes of the riot and the violence at the Capitol. And it was very clear he couldn't be moved. We know from Mark Meadows' text messages how many Republicans, how many Fox News hosts, how many Trump allies were pleading with him to do something. He didn't. We know that there are some aides who burst into the Oval Office, including his daughter, Ivanka Trump, pleaded with him to do something. He didn't. So this fell to the vice president, Mike Pence, whose life was in jeopardy. There were hang Mike Pence chants ringing through the Capitol. Donald Trump, per the committee last night, was approving of these chants, and Pence, with his life in danger, his family alongside, it It was up to him to make these calls, to call the Pentagon, to get the National Guard to finally be deployed. He had to do it because Donald Trump, the man who created this siege, this riot, this insurrection, couldn't be bothered.
And so many of the things that the right has trotted out that sort of veered from spin to BS to sort of malicious, intentional lies was dispensed with once and for all. I mean, we have the testimony that Mark Short went to the Secret Service the day before, 24 hours ahead of time, and said, Vice President's going to be in danger tomorrow. I mean, there is nothing that wasn't known to the most senior White House officials about violence on the 6th, Rick.
Yes, well, I'm glad you've zeroed in on this particular passage. It's my favorite one because I think it crystallizes so much about Donald Trump himself and the Trump administration. I have a slightly more radical interpretation of what was happening there, which is that Donald Trump has no idea how to be president. He had no idea how to govern. Even after one term in office, he would have no idea that he needed to call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs or the Secretary of Defense or the Department of Homeland Security or the Attorney General. Doesn't know how to operate the system. What we had is the contrast
all of them
with
to
Mike
steal
Pence.
Voting machines. I mean, he did a week earlier when he wanted the Pentagon and the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to go steal voting machines. He just didn't know how to deploy them to save anybody, including Mike Pence.
But in every memoir that's been written, he says that in general in the Oval Office, and he hopes people comply. But if you had to say to him, who do you call to steal voting machines? He wouldn't know. He doesn't even know the basic thing about how to be the chief executive officer of the United States. And the contrast with Mike Pence is stunning. Mike Pence is a longtime government employee. He knew exactly what to do. He needed to call the Attorney General. He needed to call the Joint Chiefs. He needed to call about the National Guard. I actually think Donald Trump, he was frozen because the narrative was going the wrong way, and he had no idea what to do. And that also crystallizes the other idea is that being president for him was only about the narrative. The narrative, being presidential, was a presidential narrative. He had no idea how to govern. And Mark Meadows became the ball guy, the only guy who could try to execute that for him. It's just, he was just an empty suit. The emperor had no clothes, although he endangered democracy, both through ignorance and through venom.